The digital thermometer let out a sharp beep. 104 degrees. My entire body was shivering violently under a heavy wool blanket, and every breath felt like swallowing crushed glass. Down the hallway, I could hear the rapid, heavy footsteps of my daughter, Chloe, marching toward my room. The door flew open. She didn't even bother to knock. She was wearing a tight cocktail dress and fussing with an earring. She didn't even make eye contact when she spoke. "Mom, Julian's partners are going to be here in 40 minutes. Get up. The roast isn't even in the oven, and the appetizers are still in the fridge. Stop being so dramatic. It's just a cold." I forced myself to sit on the edge of the bed. The room was spinning, but ironically, my mind had never been clearer. For 3 years, ever since my husband passed away, I had let Chloe and Julian move into my house so they could save up to buy a place. But slowly, inevitably, they had turned me into the live-in property manager, personal chef, and unpaid event planner for their busy social lives. "I'm not cooking. Chloe," I rasped out. "I'm going to the ER," she scoffed, crossing her arms. "You can't do this to me today. Julian needs to impress these people. Take some Advil, get dinner started, and you can go to bed right after." Stop being so selfish. Selfish. The word hung heavily in the stale air of the bedroom. I stared at the 30-year-old woman standing in front of me. A woman who lived under my roof, lived off my dime, and in that exact moment was perfectly willing to risk her mother's health over a networking dinner, moving at a glacial pace. I slipped on my shoes, grabbed my winter coat, and picked up my purse. I didn't argue. I just walked straight toward the bedroom door. Chloe stepped squarely in front of the frame, blocking my way. "Where exactly do you think you're going?" I didn't stop. With a firm sweep of my arm, I shoved Chloe to the side. I didn't use much force, but the sheer shock of it made her stumble back. Out in the hallway, my son-in-law, Julian, was uncorking a bottle of wine. On his wrist gleamed the Rolex I had bought him for his last birthday. "Hey, Helen," he called out, noticing my heavy coat. "Heading out on a grocery run. We're out of ice." "I'm going to the emergency room," I replied, not breaking my stride toward the front door. Julian, tell her she can't leave," Chloe shrieked from the hallway. "She's ruining our night over a tantrum." Julian set the bottle down, his brow furrowing. He stepped directly into my path, using his height to try and intimidate me. "Helen, be reasonable. You know this dinner is a huge deal for my career. You can't just leave us high and dry in our own home." Our own home. That phrase almost made me laugh. If my teeth hadn't been chattering so hard from the fever, he seemed conveniently oblivious to the fact that the walls around him, the hardwood floors beneath his feet, and the roof over his head were entirely in my name. Absolutely all of it. I looked him dead in the eye. "Get out of my way, Julian, or I swear to God. The guests you're trying to impress will arrive to find you packing your bags on the front lawn." My voice was ice cold and completely devoid of emotion. It paralyzed him. Julian took a slow step back. I pulled open the heavy oak front door and stepped out into the biting winter air. As I walked down the driveway to wait for my lift, I could hear Chloe screaming that I was an embarrassment to the family. The freezing night air cleared my head. Sitting in the back of the ride share, watching the driver eye me with concern in the rearview mirror, I knew exactly what I had to do next. The urgent care room was washed in harsh, sterile white light. After checking my vitals, the doctor immediately hooked me up to an IV. I was severely dehydrated, and the fever was dangerously high. As the cold saline rushed into my veins, I closed my eyes and gave myself exactly 3 minutes to just breathe. There were no tears. I didn't feel sorry for myself. I only felt a bone-deep disappointment that was rapidly hardening into ironclad resolve. I pulled my phone out of my purse. It was past 9 o'clock at night. But I knew Marcus, the financial advisor who had managed my and my late husband's money for 2 decades, would answer. "Helen," Marcus answered on the second ring. "Is everything all right? It's not like you to call this late." "Marcus, I need you to take care of something first thing tomorrow morning," I said, my voice hoarse but steady. "I want you to cancel all the authorized user credit cards in Chloe and Julian's names and put a hard stop on the automatic monthly transfer to their checking account." There was a brief pause on the line. "Helen, if I do that, they'll have zero access to your funds by tomorrow. Are you absolutely sure?" 100% sure. The bank of Mom is permanently closed. I hung up and set the phone face down on the metal tray table next to my bed. For years, I had genuinely believed that providing them with a financial safety net would help them launch their lives. Instead, I had bankrolled 2 incredibly cruel, entitled adults. The fever was finally starting to break thanks to the medication. And right along with it, the eager-to-please, overly accommodating mother I used to be was fading away. 2. My phone began to vibrate violently against the metal table as a flood of angry text notifications rolled in. By the next morning, the doctor officially discharged me. My temperature had dropped back to normal, and a good chunk of my energy had returned. Sitting in the clinic's cafeteria, nursing a black coffee, I finally checked my phone. I had 25 text messages from Chloe. Not a single one asked if I was okay. Julian's partners left early. Dinner was a total disaster. We had to DoorDash food and it took over an hour. I hope you're happy. Julian is beyond pissed. I locked the screen without typing a word back. I paid my copay with my primary debit card and called a car to take me home. When I pulled up to the house, Julian's luxury car was gone. He was likely at his office, the same office space whose lease I helped subsidize every month. I walked inside. The kitchen looked like a war zone, stacked cardboard takeout boxes, half-empty wine glasses, and a mountain of crusty plates overflowing in the sink. Chloe was still asleep upstairs. I didn't clean a single dish. I walked straight upstairs to my bedroom, pulled out a small carry-on suitcase, and packed my good jewelry, the deed to the house, my checkbooks, and my passports. I carried the bag down to the garage and locked it securely in the trunk of my car. I wasn't leaving anything of value lying around for people I no longer trusted. I made myself a cup of tea, sat in the oversized armchair in the living room with a good book, and waited. It didn't take long for the chaos to start. The sound of the house landline ringing pierced the quiet, immediately followed by Chloe's furious voice echoing down the stairs. Chloe stomped down the stairs, her phone gripped tightly in her hand. She was wearing her expensive silk pajamas, her hair a messy knot on top of her head. "Mom, are you down here?" she yelled as she spotted me in the living room. Again, no questions about my hospital stay. "I just tried to order our groceries on Instacart and the card declined. I called the bank and they said the account is locked. You need to fix this. It has to be a fraud alert or something." I calmly turned the page of my book. "It's not an error. Chloe, I canceled the cards this morning." She blinked at me, her face twisting in pure confusion as if I were speaking Greek. "What do you mean you canceled them? How are we supposed to buy food? How am I supposed to pay for my Pilates class this afternoon?" "With your own money," I said, snapping the book shut and looking her dead in the eye. "You both have jobs." From today on, you cover your own expenses." Her face flushed a deep, angry red. "Is this payback for last night? Please, Mom, stop being so toxic and immature. You know Julian's commission is down this month." Last night proved to me that I'm not a mother to you two. "I'm just an ATM," I replied, never raising my voice. "And that machine is out of order." Chloe let out a sarcastic, bitter laugh and shook her head. "You can't do this to us. Julian isn't going to stand for this. We live here. We have rights. He can try whatever he wants," I murmured, standing up from the armchair. "But I highly suggest you figure out what you're doing for dinner tonight. Because the pantry is bare. And I'm going out to eat." I walked out the front door, leaving her standing frozen in the middle of the living room, completely speechless. I knew the real test would come when Julian got home from work. At 6 o'clock on the dot, the heavy slam of the front door shattered the quiet house. I heard Julian's heavy footsteps in the foyer, followed by the dull thud of his leather briefcase hitting the console table. He walked in carrying a greasy, cheap pizza box. The smell of stale pepperoni reached the kitchen before he did. Chloe had clearly called him in a panic. And, without access to my credit cards, he'd been forced to pay for dinner in cash. I was standing at the stove, carefully measuring out loose-leaf chamomile for a cup of tea. I didn't turn around right away. "Helen!" Julian barked from behind me. He was trying to sound patient, but the tight clench of his jaw gave him away. He slammed the pizza box down on the granite island way harder than necessary. "Chloe just told me some crazy story about the bank accounts. I'm going to assume there was a glitch, or you just forgot to pay the maintenance fees." I turned off the burner and poured the hot water into my mug. "There's no glitch, Julian. It was me. I canceled your authorized user access this morning." He loosened his tie, letting out a heavy, exasperated sigh. He took 2 aggressive steps toward me, invading my personal space, a cheap intimidation tactic I knew he used on his junior employees. "Look, I get that you're upset about the miscommunication last night. You were stressed, but cutting off our access to the family funds is a massive, disproportionate overreaction. I am the man of this house. I have an image to maintain, and I need that liquidity for my business." I blew softly on the steam rising from my mug and held his gaze without backing up an inch. "You are not the man of this house. You are a guest relying on my hospitality, a guest who, last night, ordered me to stay and serve hors d'oeuvres to his frat buddies while I was burning up with a 104-degree fever." Chloe appeared in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, backing up her husband. "Mom, you are completely out of control. You're acting like a dictator. Dad would never have let you humiliate us like this." Weaponizing my dead husband was her classic, go-to tactic to make me cave. Years ago, it would have sent a sharp pang of guilt through my chest. Today, I felt absolutely nothing. "Your father worked double shifts for 40 years to pay off this mortgage." I took a slow sip of my tea, feeling the warmth slide down my throat. "And I can promise you, he never busted his back so his hard work could become a free ride for 2 grown adults who can't even buy their own groceries." Julian's face turned bright red. "If you insist on taking things to this extreme, you leave us no choice. We've been living under this roof for 3 years. We have tenant rights in this state, and you can't just pull the rug out from under us overnight." I set my mug down on the counter. I knew perfectly well they would try to pull the squatter's rights card. I dried my hands on a dish towel and walked into the formal dining room, motioning for them to follow me. Resting in the center of the oak dining table was a manila folder I had prepped that afternoon. I flipped it open and slid a crisp, 3-page document across the wood toward Julian. It was a standard residential lease agreement I had downloaded off the internet and filled out by hand. He picked up the pages, his brow furrowed in confusion, and quickly scanned the first few paragraphs. Chloe hovered over his shoulder, reading along. "What the hell is this?" Julian's voice suddenly lost a lot of its arrogant swagger. "It's a standard month-to-month lease agreement," I said, tapping my index finger on the dollar amount written on page 2. "That is the current market rate for renting a property of this square footage in this zip code, $3,500 a month, plus your proportional third of the water and electric bills. You have until Friday to sign it and wire me the first month's rent along with a security deposit. If you choose not to, you have exactly 30 days to vacate my property." Chloe snatched the paper out of his hands, her eyes wide with horror. "You're charging us rent to live in our own house. You've lost your mind. We are not paying you a dime. It is my house." "Chloe," I corrected her, resting both hands casually on the back of a dining chair. "The deed and the title are exclusively in my name. The money in those accounts is mine. There is no legal document on earth that grants you permanent residency here without my consent. The rules of engagement just changed." Julian tossed the lease back onto the table, desperately trying to regain control of the room. "We aren't signing that garbage, and we aren't moving. You can't just throw us out on the street because you're having a bad week." I offered a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. "I'm not physically dragging you out. You have 30 days by law. But those 30 days are going to be on my terms." I reached into my cardigan pocket and pulled out the small, portable Wi-Fi router that powered the internet for the entire house, along with a heavy brass padlock. I set them both on the table right next to the lease. "I've permanently disconnected the high-speed internet. My cleaning lady has strict instructions not to step foot in your bedrooms or touch your laundry starting tomorrow. Furthermore, I've changed the keypad codes to the main garage. I have the only physical key, so you'll need to park your cars out on the street from now on." Julian instinctively pulled his smartphone out of his pocket. He stared at the screen. The little Wi-Fi icon was completely gone. The brutal reality of the situation seemed to hit him like a freight train. Every ounce of control over their daily comforts, the central AC, the streaming services, the fully stocked pantry, the security of their vehicles was resting entirely in the palm of my hand. They both stood there in stunned silence, staring at the padlock and the router on the table like they were alien artifacts. Chloe's mask of righteous indignation completely crumbled, instantly replaced by raw, panicked dread. For the very first time in their adult lives, their safety net had been completely vaporized. And there was absolutely no one left to blame or demand things from. I turned my back on them and walked into the kitchen to finish my tea, leaving the contract sitting on the table. A cold war didn't require shouting. It just required action. The next 10 days dragged by in a suffocatingly thick atmosphere. True to my word, the internet stayed off and the housekeeper stopped cleaning their wing of the house. Almost immediately. Chloe and Julian's dirty laundry started piling up in the hallways, and greasy delivery bags overflowed from the kitchen trash cans. I stuck strictly to my own routine. I cooked single portions for myself, cleaned only the spaces I used, and took long, peaceful walks in the afternoons. I completely ignored their resentful glares and the muttered insults every time I walked past them. One afternoon, while I was out in the backyard watering my hydrangeas, Chloe stepped out onto the patio. She had dark circles under her eyes and looked utterly exhausted. "Julian and I were looking at apartments today," she mumbled, staring at her feet. "Everything in this city is so expensive. They want co-signers, plus first, Last, and a security deposit. We don't have that kind of cash up front because you cut off our cards. Then you'll need to adjust your expectations. Look further out into the suburbs. Or pick up a side hustle, I replied, never taking the hose off the flower bed. Independence isn't cheap. Are you really going to sit back and let your only daughter move into some sketchy neighborhood? She pleaded, trying to press the guilt button one last time. I turned off the hose nozzle and turned to face her. You let me drive myself to an emergency room with a dangerous fever so you wouldn't ruin a dinner party. Chloe, let's not lecture each other on what family owes one another. You have 20 days left on your notice. She opened her mouth to argue, but snapped it shut when she realized my emotional buttons had been completely disconnected. She turned around and dragged her feet back into the house. The very next morning, the flattened cardboard boxes started arriving. Moving day finally arrived. Julian had rented a U-Haul truck, which he was forced to park out on the street since I still refused to give him access to the driveway gates. All morning long, they hauled out small furniture, trash bags full of clothes, and endless boxes of personal items. There was no screaming. There were no arguments. The vibe was just pure, freezing defeat. Julian couldn't even look me in the eye. His massive ego was clearly bruised by the realization that he held absolutely zero power over me. Chloe dramatically sobbed a few times while packing her car, clearly hoping to bait a reaction out of me. I just sat in a rocking chair on the front porch, sipping a glass of iced tea, quietly watching them pack up their lives. Right before she climbed into the passenger seat of the moving truck, Chloe marched up to the porch steps. I hope you're happy. Mom, you're destroying your own family just to prove a point. I looked down at her with absolute, unwavering calm. No, Chloe. I'm protecting my peace. Someday, when you stop blaming the rest of the world for your problems, you'll understand the difference. I wish you both luck. Julian honked the U-Haul horn impatiently. Chloe shot me one last venomous glare and climbed up into the cab. I sat and watched the bulky truck rumble down the street until it disappeared around the corner. I stood up, stretched, and walked back inside my empty house. The living room no longer smelled like Julian's overpowering, expensive cologne, and the walls no longer echoed with Chloe's endless complaints. I walked into the kitchen and threw the windows wide open, letting the crisp midday breeze blow through the house to clear out the stagnant air. For the first time in 5 years, the silence wasn't lonely or uncomfortable. It was profoundly liberating. It's been 8 months since that night with the 104-degree fever. Life inside these walls has changed radically. I hired a crew to repaint the dark hallways in bright, warm tones, and I completely gutted Julian's old home office, turning it into a pottery studio, a hobby I had abandoned decades ago. I now rent the upstairs suite to a married couple who teach at the local university. They are incredibly quiet, pay their rent on the first of the month without fail, and treat me with nothing but respect. With the extra rental income, I've started mapping out a month-long road trip down the Carolina coast, something I never allowed myself to do when I was busy financing someone else's luxury lifestyle. Chloe and I still talk occasionally. She's working a full-time corporate job now, and Julian was forced to sell his luxury car to keep up with their new rent. When she calls me, our conversations are brief and polite. There are no more demands, no more guilt trips, and absolutely no requests for money. She knows there is an invisible, electric fence between us now, and she knows better than to touch it. There was no cinematic, tearful reconciliation. We didn't hug it out and beg for forgiveness. I simply accepted that my daughter is who she is, and she finally accepted that I am no longer her personal ATM or her maid. Sometimes, when I'm sitting out on the back patio enjoying the late afternoon sun, I think back to that night. I think about how incredibly fast an empire of entitlement crumbles when the person holding up the foundation simply takes one step backward. I don't regret a single second of it. I built this life with my own two hands, and I have finally learned how to enjoy it for myself. If the roof over your head is yours, if the money in the bank is yours, and if the peace in your heart is yours, the only real question left is why on earth should you wait until you're dangerously sick to finally claim it?